Hey, folks, it is April the 20th, and today we are going to continue along with four more slides as far as the Age of Revolution in Europe. And of course, remember this influences here in America as well. And let me think. There's going to be no lecture on Friday because we're going to have the fun run day. So that means we're not going to have normally scheduled classes. And tomorrow, your study island is due. And Thursday next week, your project is due. So make sure you do that. So even if you're at home in your pajamas, eating Cheerios off the floor or whatever you do. All right. All right. So last time we talked about the English Civil War, something we talked about it. But remember, the English Civil War is going to lead to some atrocities you will see in the 20th century. But it will also lead to some of the rights that you will see pushed forward in the 20th century in America as well. So here is, I don't remember what this is from. Gosh, okay. So, yeah. That was from the English Civil War. So like these are the Cavaliers, and it looks like they're charging into battle. So, and so remember, the English Civil War sparked by a king who tried to illegally tax and then arrest the members of parliament, their representative government. And they said, you can't do this. And so they had a war. The war was very religious themed as well. You had Christian against Christian because of differing beliefs as well. Parliament would win. They would have a theocracy, essentially where a religious group is going to make rule over the country and really suppress those who don't agree with them, even religiously. And it was led by a guy called Oliver Cromwell, who was known for his cruelty, but also he was kind of an effective leader in other ways too, because he was very good, I guess, at ratcheting down on people who disagree. Well, after the death of Cromwell, Charles II will return to England. That is the son of Charles I. Remember, had his head cut off. His father's, so he returned to England and his father's throne from the English Commonwealth. So remember, the English people begged him to come back. They wanted stability. They wanted to turn the clock back. They thought things went way too crazy, tired of the bloodshed, tired of laws, banning and everything they could think of, and having laws that forced them to practice perhaps a faith that they didn't choose. Like they might want to go to a different church. Well, sorry. The law said they had to go to this one. And this is why the founders of America didn't want church and state to be the same thing. They wanted separation. They didn't want the government forcing you to go to a church. And they didn't want the government telling your pastor what to say and things like that. And vice versa. They didn't want one religious group ruling over the others. So he was well-loved king. His son James II was not, if you remember that. In 1688, James II was overthrown due to his close ties to the Catholic Church in a time of increasing English patriotism. Remember, they kicked him out, and they actually invited kings from outside of a king and a queen from outside of England to come take over. This was known as the Glorious Revolution because it was nonviolent. James II was so unpopular that his own troops wouldn't defend him. So he had to run away, and he went to go live in France the rest of his life, living off the King of France. The new king, William Orange, so it was William and Mary Orange, they were from the Netherlands, replaced him and adopted the English Bill of Rights in 1689 and made a constitutional monarchy. This English Bill of Rights is going to outline some of the rights that the founders of America are going to fight for. Because remember, when the American Revolution starts, they didn't say, we want to kill the king, we want to be away from the king. No, they were like, we are patriotic Englishmen. We have rights. Why aren't you respecting our rights? As outlined in the English Bill of Rights. And so a constitutional monarchy, remember, that limits the king. It means you can't be the God king. You can't say whatever you want and make it into law. You can't force us to pay money without our permission. can't steal our property and execute us. You have to follow certain rules like us. And so, and never again will England be ruled by an English royal family. So first it's Dutch, and later it'll be a German royal family, all the way up to today. I mean, they're thoroughly English by now, but like their families are from overseas. Yeah. So, whatever. Nowadays they're basically just celebrities. They don't really do any government stuff. So. Yeah, we see all these things. Like, this is the type of thing that people in the American Revolution are thinking about. They're thinking about these things. Well, in my grandfather's day, they had King James, and they kicked him out because he was a jerk. Nobody liked him, and he was trying to step on people's rights, force religion on people that they didn't agree with, and so yeah, and this fear and this division in Christianity is going to sadly be a common theme in early American history too. The distrust between different Protestant denominations and Catholicism. In fact, in some of the colonies, there was actually burnings of Catholic priests who were caught preaching to the Indians. And of course, on the flip side, they weren't trusted within like Catholic lands either. So this is going to be one of those things that's going to carry on for a very long time up until modern days. When you think about it, really, like that kind of bias and stuff like that is very long lasting, right? So it took the Holocaust and World War II to shake a lot of people out of their hatred of Jewish people. And people are like, whoa, I guess this could go overboard and lead to horrible things. And yes, it can. It can. Hatred can do that. All right, let's go to the next one. I'm not showing the picture. All right, human rights. So, in the 18th century, a young slave named Olada Equiano. I actually read his autobiography, right? So he was he's a young man in Africa and wrote about all this. And so when he was a boy, his tribe was raided by another African tribe. And then they bound him up and they marched him and all the women and children in chains across hundreds of miles in Africa, all the way to the coast where he was sold as a slave. And he talked about how awful it was to watch people he loved get killed. And then he was sold by his fellow Africans to these slave traders. And he talked about the horrors of being on the slave boat and the plantation. And then eventually he was able to get his freedom and live in England. And so people in England would read his autobiography and they were like heartbroken by it. And that's why before America, England is going to outlaw the slave trade and slavery. And this will influence what we call the abolitionists in America, the ones who are going to push for an end to slavery in America. Hey, Bo, you okay? You okay? Okay. And of course, we're going to see more of this come later. So we're seeing like human rights, right? And this was a big thing of the day because remember, you really can't, besides death, have a greater loss of life than slavery because it takes everything from you. There's you have no choice. The work you do, the property you have around you, none of it's yours. And then in some cases, your family as well. So here's another guy, William Wilberforce, a British politician, then leads England to abolish slavery in the Slave Trade Act of 1807. And so Wilberforce was a very, very religious Christian, and he saw this as an affront to what in England called itself a Christian country. It's like, well, how can you be a Christian country if you have slaves? How can you do that when there's torture involved and the loss of rights and all these other horrible things? And so despite him being very unpopular at first, he's going to gain a lot of traction and push for this law. And this law will also influence America. Because of this, you're going to have in North America, though they still had slavery, they stopped bringing in people from Africa. So they stopped the raids and the trade across the ocean. So it slowed it down somewhat. Following his death in 1833, England passes the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, which ended slavery in most of the British Empire. The British Empire was big. It was big. It was all around the globe. There was a saying that the sun never sets on the British Empire because they had land all around the whole globe. And so there's always going to be sunlight somewhere. So we're talking about like Australia, New Zealand, America's many islands, India, much of Asia, and of course, Canada, So yeah, it was very long reaching. Philosopher and author Mary Wollstonecraft argued that women deserve the same rights as men. So you're going to see this go hand in hand. You're going to have this in America too. So you're going to have the women's rights movement and the abolition anti-slavery movement join hand in hand in American history all the way up till the end of the Civil War. Once the Civil War is over, and when African American men get the right to vote, a lot of the women's rights groups are going to be like, well, how come we didn't get it? And so they're going to disconnect. And we're like, I guess they saw it as unfair. But a lot of these things, like the right to vote for women, it starts in England. And you're going to have, they're called suffragists. And the suffragettes are going to go down to England. They're going to learn from the English. And they're going to come to America. And they're going to push for the right to vote for Americans too. But of course, as you know, it's going to be quite some time. It's going to be in the early 1900s. In fact, we just hit this school year, we hit the centennial for the women's right to vote in America. So it's only been 100 years. Which is much longer than my lifetime. All right, let's go to slide 3 out of 4. Poop. Okay. My bad. I forgot that was the last one on this one. It says get a 3. We already looked at the 3 week slides. Okay. That means we ended this unit, and we ended it faster than I thought. So just keep in mind that's kind of the theme that we have going on here. What happens in Europe influences America. What happens in America influences Europe. So we're going to see in the next unit, when we come back, we're going to see that like things like the Civil War in America is going to really impact Europeans and how they fight. In fact, during the American Civil War, you're going to have European generals are going to send their generals. The European militaries are going to send their generals to our battlefields to watch how Americans are slaughtering one another so they could learn tactics and technology and things like that. And then they would apply that in their own European wars as they become more and more modern until you get up to World War I. The use of artillery, machine gun fire, digging trenches, moving away from the Napoleonic tactics, we're all standing in lines and firing their rifles and muskets into one another. Where they're going to stop wearing flashy colors that have all their troops stand out in the battlefield. But you're also going to have the development of something that's going to be revolutionary called smokeless gunpowder. Because like back in the day, gunpowder, whenever you fired your rifle, would make a giant black plume, like gray plume, right? You couldn't see through it. So battlefields, soldiers couldn't see soldiers. They could just see the guys next to them in their bright colors and know which direction to go as they try to, if they're hoping they're not deafened, listen to the drummers and the bugles. And so it was chaotic. But once gunpowder goes smokeless, people can hide when they shoot. And they can hide behind things that will protect them. And so it's going to really change tactics. And the Germans in particular are going to learn from this. And so a lot of what we have today as far as like modern infantry fighting in the military actually developed by Germans before World War I and then again before World War II. So, hey, folks. So I had less slides than I thought. So we're done a little early. Please make sure, I'm going to check just now to see who's done with their study island, who's not. So make sure that's your priority because it's due tomorrow. And also we're going to work on the project. And I'm going to get my next unit slides together for next time. See you tomorrow. I really thought we had more than that. That's surprising. I got to dig that up.